Welcome to AI Unveiled with me, Gaurav Kotak. Today, I'm speaking with Alex Levin, co-founder and CEO of Regal, a platform that is bringing AI phone agents to contact centers. Alex shares why traditional models of reducing customer interactions are failing. Regal flips the script of driving revenue growth by enabling more proactive and personalized engagements. Of course, AI makes this feasible at scale and at lower cost. Alex believes that 90% of support interactions will be managed by AI agents in the future, so we discuss the implications for the global workforce. I also asked Alex how Regal ensures that the customer experience is good enough. AI agents make errors, but so do human agents. So many of the techniques of ensuring quality in a pre-AI era can be repurposed if not replicated. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let's dive in. Alex, thanks for doing this and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
To kick things off, maybe you can give us a brief summary of what the Regal platform does.
Sure. So just to take a step back, my co-founder and I used to run a very large contact center. We had about 5,000 people in the home services industry, and we used legacy tools. And we were taught, basically don't talk to your customer. We were taught contact centers are a cost center, reduce the number of interactions as much as possible and you'll be in good shape. And what we found actually in the home services business is that was wrong. Is the more we ignored customers, actually, the worse our business got, right? Customers wouldn't book services as much. They wouldn't repeat as much. And so we started shifting into this model where we said, actually, what we want is we want to treat customers as if we were a mom and pop, home services company, a mom and pop roofer, a mom and pop fencing company. What would they do? Because they're great and they have great businesses, good retention rates. And, what do they do? Well, they greet customers by name. They always answer anytime. They're there to help with the next project. And so we started thinking, how do we offer that same high level of care, that same high level of sales, but at an infinitely larger scale? And it's quite difficult because the software products that exist really weren't built for that. So ultimately, we started Regal because we wanted to offer this high touch care in a lot of these industries that, are coming online now, like home services, like insurance, healthcare. And that's really what we focus on at Regal. We build the software for these contact centers so they can give much more personalized, much higher quality interactions with their customers while still doing it at a relatively low cost at scale.
That's great. And then in your response, you talked about care, you also talked about revenue, and you also talked about cost center. And your website says helping call center teams generate 25% more revenue immediately. Can you elaborate a little bit on that transition from thinking as a cost center to a revenue generating opportunity through the lens of customer care?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, you walk into a marketing team, what are they talking about? Well, how am I going to hit my budget this year? My budget is revenue. You walk into a contact center team and their budget largely is reduced costs. And partly what we've seen is that, incentives drive outcomes, right? So when you're incentivizing your cost center team only to drive down costs, well, that's what they're going to do. If you flipped it and you said, look, let's break down the barriers between the marketing team, the product team, and the contact center team, and said all of us are treating the customer, right? I use sometimes like the blind man and the elephant as an example. Like there's the one like feeling something going, oh, this feels like a rope. There's the other one going, this feels like a wall. There's the other one on the other side saying, oh, what is this thing? And, it's the same elephant, but they're all coming at it from different angles. And when you silo them, they really have a hard time putting together a cohesive experience with that customer. So when you break down the walls and all of them can have the same goals, which is drive these revenue goals at this ROI, right? If you can invest $1 and get $2 in revenue back, you'll do it all day long. It changes the mentality. So we work with contact centers to stop thinking only about cost reduction and start thinking about opportunities to use every interaction to drive revenue. Simple example would be, let's say a customer calls in looking for package tracking or knowing whether their professional is on the way for a job. Typically in contact centers, you try to move that to self-serve or to a text channel and handle that as efficiently as possible. However, if you open your mind, you say, look, what we should be looking at is who is that individual customer and is there a reason we want to talk to them now? And perhaps if they're a customer that is moving that you could sell 3 other services to, you would actually let that call through, handle it, even if it's expensive via voice, to have the opportunity to talk about other things. So from shifting from a cost-based view to a revenue-based view is a big part of success in the future and opens up opportunities to start thinking about ways to treat customers better. So instead of looking at contact centers only as a way to drive down costs, start thinking about, every interaction. If I did X, how much incremental revenue would I get versus what is my cost? And if the ROI is worth it, I'll go and do it.
Awesome. And you talk a little bit about how you and your co-founder, Rebecca, came up with the idea of Regal with your prior experience working at a contact center where you were trained not to speak to the customer to avoid costs. But maybe just take a step back, even one more step back. Just can you tell us a little bit more about your background before that?
Sure. So I went to liberal arts undergrad, studied philosophy and psychology, and highly recommend, a liberal undergraduate degree. But, as I realized I didn't want to be an academic and I started looking at business, I started realizing every company would be a technology company. They're never going to let anybody be a CEO who doesn't understand how the technology is built now. So, I became a product manager for a few different startups and really love that. And, love the ability to dig in, to new problems, every day have new things that were broken or perhaps not yet fixed, whichever way you want to look at it. And so I've stayed in startups largely, my whole career, and eventually my co-founder and I decided we wanted to be the ones leading because we found something that we were very passionate about and felt that there could be a big improvement. And I think that's a big leap. That's perhaps not for everybody, but, I think both of us have really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and you mentioned that every company is becoming a technology company. And I think ironically, the most important role in the technology company is the liberal arts and philosophy and background, especially as LLMs are commoditizing coding and things like that. So that's great. Awesome. So let's start with big picture, right? Customer support, call center is probably one of the areas where the impact of AI seems like the most short term. So I guess just one broad question, say 5 years from now, what % of support calls or calls to a contact center will be handled by an AI agent versus humans?
Oh, 90% AI, no doubt. Zero doubt in my mind. So if you go back to what you're asking, contact centers are uniquely sort of interesting places for AI for a few reasons. So first of all, every interaction is already tagged. There's these huge companies that are going out and trying to tag models and do whatever to teach AI. Well, guess what? In the contact center, you literally have agents all day long. We're talking with a customer, dispositioning it, telling you what to do next. And so you can use all that information to very easily teach an AI agent what should be done in that interaction. So the structured data is quite unique in the contact center. Also, interactions are relatively well understood. So the majority of interactions in the contact center are not open-ended. They have a specific goal. The goal could be to qualify a customer for a product or to sell them a product or to handle an inbound interaction, a specific question about something. But it's rarely just truly open-ended. So it's actually much easier for the AI to handle because there's a specific goal in each interaction. What I've seen over the last 4 years is largely pretty disappointing AI agents. It wasn't until about 6 months ago that materially better LLMs came out, enabling us to really have certain kinds of conversations, both on text and on voice. So about 6 months ago, we started significantly investing in moving our customers from human agents to AI agents. So sure, in the contact center, do we have tools to make human agents super agents? Yes, there's all kinds of automation, there's all kinds of AI, there's all kinds of things we do for human agents. But now that it's become so clear for us that 10 years from now, it'll be 90% AI agents. The question is like, how do you switch to this new model of operating in the contact center? And I'd say today, our customers move about 10 to 20% of their calls and their text interactions to AI. That's about the average. And those are the examples that are most rote, most well understood, relatively simple, don't require big knowledge bases. And so we can handle them really well with AI today. And yeah, very quickly, I think we're going to progress from there.
So many follow-up questions to what you just said. First question is, there are millions of people that work in contact center jobs. The economy of Philippines, many parts of India have these jobs as well-paying jobs. What do you think the impact will be from a macroeconomics perspective to people in this industry?
So I'm not an economist, but I'll give you my opinion for what it's worth. I think two important sort of themes to talk about. So one is how is this going to affect the number of jobs available? If you look historically, at washing machines, internet, cell phones, some of these really drastic technology shifts. Every time people believed that it would massively destroy jobs, but instead we've actually seen job creation continue to go up. what's different, if anything, about this example is that a lot of the jobs in this specific industry are centered in certain countries. So those countries, specifically the Philippines, India, are going to have to think really, really hard about how that job creation is going to happen. And I think they are. I think already we're starting to see people shift from being human agents engaging something to being, let's say, the prompt engineers who are working with an AI, whether it's in tagging or actually in creating the prompts for AI. So first of all, I don't think there'll be destruction of jobs overall, but we do have to be careful in specific countries. Second, as a whole, AI is going to be a massive deflationary force. So what I mean by that is, today, if you think about a company that has a contact center of 3,000 people, paying them each X wage, AI is going to be materially cheaper. Let's assume it cuts the cost in half for sake of argument. Some companies may try to keep that in margin, but the smart companies will not. They'll give that money back to the customer in lower prices. That'll enable companies to have more distribution of their products, right? So let's say you were selling a product for $200, you can now sell it for $100, the same exact product, right? Which enables you to get more people on the product, increase your revenue, so on and so forth. So I think that is it's the opposite of inflation, right? It's a deflationary force, bringing prices down, enabling more people to have access to products and services in the world. And, I think that's going to be particularly exciting over the next couple of years.
Yeah. And, I think you mentioned the benefits of lower prices and more people being able to purchase, but also the secondary benefit perhaps is, well, then you have more need for support. Now, of course, a lot of more will be AI driven, but there will be an inflationary or a kind of tailwind to the human support. And then again, you talked about 90% being automated, but the more complex you get, the complexity increases, at least in my opinion, quite significantly. And you go from answering questions to taking actions, right? Do you view that being a major kind of chasm in between, or almost two different categories?
Yeah, the actions aren't that complicated, honestly. Like already we have our agents who are transferring to human agents, pre-scheduling calls, sending text messages, taking internal actions. That isn't particularly the complexity. I'd say the complexity, RAG, so big knowledge bases massively slow down the processing still. And so that's a complexity, especially in real-time voice interactions. I think, like I said, unstructured conversations, particularly ones that don't have a set or number of set end goals, are much harder for the AI to handle because it doesn't know where to go, basically. But yeah, I think it's not particularly actions. What we're seeing is, or what we believe is going to happen is, there's going to be, particularly mid-market, a shift to AI agents first. So you'll get to the 90% in mid-market first because they're going to act much more quickly. Enterprises are going to be far behind because they have legal concerns and they have processes in place. And so it's actually going to be a fascinating period where the mid-market organizations are going to get an advantage in bringing down prices and things like that first. If I think about what happens, 10 years from now, two things come to mind. One is actually the experience for customers will be way better. To my point, instead of every contact center thinking, how am I going to do low touch? They're going to start thinking, how do I give people a great high touch experience? Because AI agents have capabilities that humans don't, right? They're omnipotent. They're always available. They're relatively actually quite cheap compared to other things. So they can, that contact center can bring down costs and give people a better experience. So that's one. And two, they'll still have humans. The human jobs will just shift. There'll be sort of many more people in a contact center dedicated to what is today called onboarding, training, coaching. So today you might have one person that does that job for every 100 agents. In the future, you could have, 5 or 6 people doing that job because they're constantly going to be able to make improvements. What I mean by that is today, that one person has very little control of what those agents do. Sure, they do a bit of coaching. Maybe they change the script once a year, but there's very little. In an AI world, every day you can walk in the morning and go, what did we learn yesterday from what was going on? And how do we tweak that instantly without ever taking anybody off the floor? So that's a huge advantage. So that's going to shift. And then two, there'll still be people in what are typically called escalated or tier 2 roles. So there are going to be things that the AI agent can't handle or you don't want the AI agent to handle. Say a very complicated emotional insurance claim where the AI agent goes, okay, I've given you what I'm allowed to do, same as a first tier agent does today. But if you want beyond that, I'm going to have to pass you to a manager. And then it's going to be a manager's job to make a decision for beyond that. And, sure, there aren't going to be as many roles in that, but I think it'll allow you to have very sort of high-end people in those situations, which is what you want. You want people who are very capable in those most complex situations.
Yeah. And you already talked about prompt engineering moving to that, and kind of in that same vein, it's about kind of both training the human agents, but also orchestrating and training the AI agents, and there'll be opportunities to do that. Now, Regal provides both voice, but also chat-based, whether it's text or chat, right? Tell me a little bit about how you view about the omnichannel importance and how that will potentially change over time.
Yeah, if I think about the history of this again, the reason why a lot of businesses moved away from voice is because it was expensive and it was difficult, right? Text is much easier to handle because you can have many more templates, and it's actually much cheaper to handle because it's asynchronous. So a lot of that changes, like the entire framework for thinking about should you use voice changes when you have AI agents available. Already the cost is a fifth of using a human agent in the US, or maybe half of using an agent in India or Philippines. Already an AI agent is that cheap. And guess what? The cost is only coming
It's just
down.
going to
This
go
is going to be
down.
like flat
Yeah.
screen TVs. It's going to be
Yeah.
10x cheaper in 20 years. So, as that cost just falls through the floor, it's going to, again, enable a completely different way of looking at this. And so you're not going to have to think about voice as the expensive channel anymore. So I think that will open people's minds. Also, I think businesses are realizing that if you completely remove voice in a lot of more complicated situations, it actually hurts your business's revenue to the conversation we're having before. So take an educational institution. If they stop having any voice interaction for admissions, they see the number of applications and they see actual rates of people attending who are admitted go down. But so if they can bring back those voice interactions and keep them efficient using AI, they'll actually have better results. So for both reasons, I think you'll see actually much more voice in the future. This sort of trend towards text, I will go away a little bit. It'll still be there. Omnichannel, to your point, will still be important. There are cases where I want to do it either on self-serve or on text, but voice is powerful because you talk faster than you type. You can actually have a lot more nuance in a voice conversation than in a text conversation. And, I believe what'll happen is people will just get used to this modality. And so that'll be how you interact. Like you're going to just wake up and talk to your computer, right? You're not going to unnecessarily have to type to it. You'll just say, "Hi, computer, please set up these 5 things," and it'll go and do it. Or same thing with a world in the future where I have an AI agent that's talking to my AI agent at a brand. Funny to think about, but it's starting to happen where I'll teach my AI agent how to do things and it will just get on, whether it does text or voice or API, won't even matter. It will interface with an AI agent on the other side and go and do something.
Oh, so maybe as a consumer, I need to have my AI agent as well.
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think I fully agree and strongly believe that voice will be the primary medium of agentics, LLMs interacting with each other, because as you just said, it's more natural. People can speak, and most people can comprehend voice a little bit faster than text as well. And as you were speaking, I think some of this conversation has been comparing AI agents to human agents and how it can go from high cost to low cost and high touch. But I mean, I don't know what you think about this, but maybe people shouldn't be spending that much time on the website being the primary interface for the low touch, but instead the website should just pop up and say, "Hey, talk to one of our agents." That happens to be an AI agent. Is that something that you've thought about, or any reactions to that?
I mean, so for my generation, I think a lot about 2008, 2009 when the iPhone came out as a parallel, where everyone said, "Okay, this is a new modality. How do we do it?" And every company built an app. And you know what? 90% of them were failures because it turned out that apps were uniquely good at some things and terrible for others. So as an example, what is uniquely good at is Uber really understood that using the GPS location of somebody in real time would enable an interface that wasn't possible before. So I could call a car and I could see where the car was on the map and I could do better marketplace dynamic matching because of it. And so that was very successful. Or gaming was very successful in this new interface because it allowed a different kind of interface. I could literally move my fingers around the screen. Where on the other hand, there were a bunch of companies that built apps that did nothing. The same thing will happen here, right? Everybody's going to go and mess around with AI, and it will be 5 or 10 years before we know which ones really won. To your point, I suspect there'll be certain interfaces that are better because they use voice than others. So, do I believe? Yeah, some interfaces will move to, you'll go to a website and it'll just be like text or voice. Yeah, but not all of them. There are still reasons why I use some websites as a website and not an app. There's still reasons why some things I do in person versus, on an app. There are different interfaces that are right for different use cases. The cool thing will be when people figure out use cases that just are magic because of the new interface.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the Regal platform. Can you maybe elaborate or kind of give an overview of the Regal platform and specifically some of the AI capabilities you've launched recently and whatever you're comfortable sharing about what's coming in the roadmap?
Yeah, of course. So the biggest decision we made when we launched is that we were going to base everything on the customer. So we reimagined the contact center software with a customer at the center, because historically it's not how it worked, right? Historically, everything was based on when is my staffing and do I want to handle this or not? And everything, was it right for the business? So we flipped that. And from the start, right, we aggregate and hook into every piece of customer data a brand has, whether it's their marketing data, their website data, it could be conversations they've had in the past with that customer. We create a unified customer profile matching their current data schema. That allows both for any proactive outbound engagement or any inbound engagement that's happening, the brand to start making decisions on the individual user. So I liken it to Goosebumps Choose Your Own Adventure. So instead of treating everybody the same with the same book, right, depending on what you pick, the story is different. And that's the way it should be, right? You should treat millions of customers like one in a million. So that fundamental change is at the center of everything we do. If you look at old legacy contact center software, are they making new features? Sure, of course, but they're missing the core thing, which is the customer data at the center. So for a long time, AI agents weren't good enough, and we focused on how do you use that data to optimize the timing, the channel, the messaging for human agents. And we use a lot of AI in that, of course. But now that the AI agents have gotten better, honestly, AI agents are going to be better at this. They're going to be able to use more of the data, more of the timing. So with humans, if you have a team of 100, the max calls you can make at 2 p.m. is 100, right? And so you have to spread out calls over a day. With AI, if you decide that 2 p.m. is the right time to be calling people, you can have 1 million calls at 2 p.m. and then 0 at 2:01. So it completely changes the dynamic of how you're doing these things and allows you to be much more precise. If you want to mention the local sports team for every conversation in your opening, that's quite hard for human agents because they have to figure out what is the local sports team. Versus an AI agent, that's trivial for them to say, "Oh, hi, I see you love the Yankees." So that shift is sort of very exciting for us. What I think we're seeing in the market is there are a lot of AI agents out there that are really sort of developer tools that people can play with, but don't actually have the capabilities that are needed for a contact center. Because we came from running big contact centers and built software that's in production with hundreds of customers today, we have that. How do you, do the triggering based off of what, the customer data you have? How do you do the training? How do you do the monitoring? How do you do the QA? All that stuff is ingrained in our system, which allows our bigger customers to take AI agents into production much faster. So if you're thinking about what's today, it's very high quality AI agents that are doing 10 or 20% of interactions. Particularly, I'd say our advantages in voice. In SMS and chat, sure, we do it. I wouldn't say we're materially better than other things on the market. In voice, I've tested a lot of solutions and I go and talk with a lot of very big customers. Right now, we are materially better than what exists. On tone of voice, interruption handling, ability to handle data validation, more complicated use cases, we do very well. Going forward, it's going to be fascinating. We obviously have put more of our team to continue to invest in improving both the feel of the conversation and the functionality that is available to have more complicated conversations. But if I think about the competition in this space, Sierra is investing in voice now, and they have quite a bit of capability, and we know them well. ASAP is investing in voice and has quite a lot of capability. There are some slightly older startups that still, I think, are trying to figure out their way in this new LL model, like Poly AI, for instance, or Replicant. Those are probably the biggest 4 players other than Regal in the space today that are more production ready for contact centers. And we're all going to go out at full speed. So is the market big enough to support all 5 of us? Sure, of course.
Huge market.
There's almost a 800 billion spent on the 16 million people. And so part of what's fascinating, whereas we can go after that now instead of just the 40 billion spent on software. But, it's a lot of it's going to go to whoever does this best. And so it is now a foot race to see who can continue to improve this over the next few years.
Yeah, it's a huge market, for one of the largest markets. And as we've talked in the last 20 minutes, a market that could be expanding significantly as you put AI agents or a kind of customer care type of interface, you increase those. A few things. One is, so you talked about rules of when to send a message, what message, local sports teams. And I think on your website, it says Journey Builder. And it seems that your Journey Builder doesn't go away. It becomes more relevant in an AI agent world because the AI agents can actually follow it in a kind of more direct way. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, I think so. So I was reading some articles about the Tesla launch, and people were disappointed by to what sort of Musk had brought out, because he didn't really bring out a new autonomous car. But I think his point back to the investors was, you know that in the future there are going to be autonomous cars, but the bet is who has built the infrastructure that is ready to do that, and are you going to bet against our core sort of fundamental pieces eventually getting there? So I think we're sort of in the same place. So the AI agents are the worst they're ever going to be, as people keep saying. Who has built the core pieces that are going to allow them to build what is really necessary to succeed in this? So some people are betting on the LLM. So as an example, Poly AI and ASAP for a long time were trying to build their own LLMs effectively and failed compared to OpenAI and Meta and some of these other ones. It's fine. They are now shifting to obviously using new LLMs instead of the ones they spent years and hundreds of millions of dollars building, but they're now shifting to that. Other people are very focused on just the AI agent interaction. So there's a lot of developer tools that are coming out that are relatively early now. We are focused on that piece a little bit, yes, but also, like I said, on how you actually put this in production, where we think the journey builder, the IVR capabilities, the using first party data gives us a massive advantage over anything else that exists on the market. Look, if one of the other players goes out and builds all that, then sure, it'll be a fair fight. But until then, it's not a fair fight, because we walk in and have much more first party customer data and the ability to control much more exactly which interaction happens, and the ability to decide, is it an AI agent call, a human call, an agentless call, which is more of a deterministic bot, or even a voicemail drop or an SMS. So because we're multi-channel in beyond AI, it gives that brand a lot more capabilities than just always AI. So we think, yes, point solutions might sell more easily in the short term. In the long term, you're going to need the tools that we have to actually run this at full scale and take advantage.
And to clarify, your applications like yours, or specifically for you, how much, when you have an engineering team, an R&D team, how much of them are focusing on just the core language foundations or even the voice latency versus what to say, right? Where do you think you're going to be spending the most research R&D in? What level of the stack?
Yeah. So, I'll talk from an investor's perspective for a second. I think the biggest risk to investors in the space right now is, where to invest in the stack, because it's unclear, what pieces, for instance, OpenAI will do themselves and win on versus, sort of other people will be able to differentiate on. So if I think about us, I don't think about it quite from an investor lens. I think about it from where can we differentiate from customers, but it's, similar ultimately point. So I think, LLMs will continue to build better and better models that require less and less training, and that's not where we spend our time. Do we do a little bit of stuff that applies across everybody? Sure. Do we make sure that the 50 words that are unique to insurance, including how they pronounce the brand? It's very funny to see how AI pronounces brand names. But, do we make sure all that stuff is correct? Sure. There's a little bit of pre-training that happens, but largely we're saying we think that'll be the domain of the LLMs themselves. The tools to actually then build the what they typically call prompt engineering, so that what is said when, in what order, we're doing today. But eventually, I do think a lot of those underlying models will get into. Where I think we differentiate in the long run is on how do you use the first party data to do personalization repeatedly, on how do you deploy these in a production environment where there's monitoring, QA, coaching, all that stuff that is typically needed in a contact center environment. I think those are more the flows that are unique to contact centers. I don't think in any sort of reasonable time frame the LLMs are going to get into, because they have 50 different use cases. They have movies, they have video games, they have science, healthcare, whatever. They're not going to go and build a contact center specific product today.
Yeah.
Are they eventually going to be like Google, who goes, oh, wow, I see that there's a lot of search ads for flights. I'm going to create google.com/flights and steal the majority of that, traffic at the top of my page. Sure, these guys are very smart. They'll get there eventually. But, the hope is by then, we have enough market presence that, will be sort of material. But it's, I think that's really this workflow specific pieces are the ones where we'll continue to maintain differentiation, in our opinion.
And what about understanding the intent of the the user, not just what they're saying, but how they're saying it, the pause, the intonations. Is that kind of in the horizontal domain of the language models or audio models, or more in the contact center domain?
Yeah, look, definitely we've had people approach us because of the data we have, because we have all of these calls. The privacy rules are tricky, right? We have to actually go to our customers and make sure our customers want that data to be used in that way. But some customers do. And definitely, like, we are not investing in the same compute resources as some of the underlying providers. So where there are underlying providers who are willing to invest in, hey, we want to make a better model specifically for handling certain kinds of issue, we're happy to work with them. Again, I don't think, like, we don't want our unique advantage to be access to capital and access to compute. That is the game that ultimately, in my opinion, OpenAI is playing. That really, it's access to capital, access to compute. As much as you say it's researchers and intelligence and whatever. I'm not sure that's really the game they're playing. So we're not going to compete with them on that game. And we think it's a failing proposition for other people who don't have the same access to those two resources. Instead, we're going to partner with them and work with them to improve those models. Maybe if we're lucky, we can convince them to, give them data that'll only improve our version of that model. Is that likely? Probably not. But I don't think that's where the differentiation will come. Again, if I think about the internet, like, as speeds got better on cable lines, sure, did the cable providers get rich? Yeah, of course. But, I can now make a better app because the internet speed is faster. So I think about it in that model.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, it's good to know that you're not spending a lot of time trying to get your hands on NVIDIA H200s.
I don't think that's what we're uniquely good at. I think we understand contact centers. We understand, we have a marketing and sort of growth-oriented background, which gives us a unique view on how to do the work in contact centers.
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, if there are times where you have to tune the models or even create your own models, it doesn't need to be large language. It can be smaller models which have significantly lower compute, but just the access to some fine-grained data and maybe some technique that works, which we see quite a bit as well.
Yeah, my co-founder and I invest in startups, and we have put money into startups that are working on some of these problems. And there's some, cool products coming out that we may start using, to your point, to start making more fine-grained control and, A/B tests. And I think one of our customers came to us the other day, and his point was, look, like, part of what Regal's great at is creating lots of ability to do A/B testing. But within AI agents, like, maybe what we need to have for him is just constant iteration, because he doesn't even want to do it. Like, how does he constantly have tone of voice, male, female, age of voice, objection, like, constantly on A/B testing and constantly improving? Like, that's more what he wants than even to have to manually say, hey, I want to try a man now. Oh, tomorrow I want to try, like, because it's all computational. Again, I think that's an opportunity for us to get much better at it. And, I think that what I think about is this going to be like Optimizely, where what happens is you test a bunch till you find the optimal solution, and then if everybody drops Optimizely because they found the optimal solution? Or is it going to be like, I don't know what, Netflix, where there's still improvement to be had. And so it's worth somebody continuing to use that product because they're going to continuously see improvement. So obviously it's like Optimizely, that would be bad because then we'll lose the business. If it's a more complicated problem, that's good. So I'm betting on the side that there's more complexity in this over the next 10, 20 years than people imagine. And so the startups that can move fast, then give people the iterative tools to A/B test, are going to be the ones that win over even incumbents, just because the incumbents are going to be years behind on this technology.
Yeah, makes sense. And A/B testing, but let's broadly speaking, testing and evaluation and quality. How do you test that the quality you're putting out there, especially of your AI agents, is good enough that they're representing your customers well?
Yeah, so it's an area actually my co-founder and I have invested a lot in startups, is this question of how do you do testing in an AI environment. So a couple of things we talk about. So one is AI is not code. So everyone starts going, oh yeah, like, engineers know how to handle AI. Well, by and large, no. You know how knows how to handle AI actually is contact centers. Because contact centers have a lot of experience in humans that do insane things, and they have to train them and, keep them within the straight and narrow to get the outcome that they want. Engineers are used to writing code, testing once, putting it to production.
Well, it's more
AI
deterministic.
does not work that way, right? It's not deterministic. So the ability to have models and sort of QA that is constantly monitoring all the different variation and spitting out sort of the aberrations so you can decide if they were good and you want to move in that direction or bad and you want to sort of shut it down is one of the critical functions. So from what we've seen so far, there's not sort of one way to do that in every AI example. There's a couple startups trying to say they can do it for all, but they really can't. In each example, there you need to develop your own way of doing it. So for our example, it looks a little bit like what you used to call conversation intelligence, in that, right, every AI call is transcribed. It is split into the different speakers. We split into concepts. We then have specific QA, right? Did they say their name? Did they say it was reported live? Did they do the, so that we can score all the calls and then, disposition them and see sort of what concepts happened in the call and decide if, based on the data we have showing conversion, if that call was better than average or worse than average, and should, it's like the creative destruction of evolution, or so the Darwin's theory of evolution, right? There's lots of variation, and from the variation there are winners and losers, and you move towards the winner. So that's sort of the model we look at within our specific world. But again, some of the startups we've invested in do it for different kinds of AI products and do it in different ways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned this a few times, and I'm just reminding myself what an advantage it is to be both a CEO of a company, a scale up, and an investor in startups, because it actually helps you in both ways, because you're getting to see cutting edge that can help you at Regal, and then your role at Regal can also help you find some of the greatest companies. So good on you.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it, for sure is that, but I also think back to like when we started this company, a lot of people were very helpful to us, and we try to give back in like a very small way. We're not big investors by any mean, but if we can help people in a material way once a year, I think that really moves the needle for them. We love to do that.
Oh, that's awesome. You talked about conversational intelligence and kind of reviewing the quality post facto, right? Which is kind of and generally, as a consumer, when I call, I'm talking to an AI bot. I typically know I'm talking to one, and sometimes I get stuck and be like, "Oh, wait for a human," right? Is that the optimal? Because the current UX is talk to a bot. If the bot gets stuck, wait for a human, right? Is there a more seamless way to both check the accuracy and transition from AI to human?
I'll push you on one thing. So I have to catch myself to not call them bots anymore. So the distinction I draw is between deterministic bots and generative AI agents. So I'll push you to say they're not even bots. But aside from that vernacular, so even with humans, we had this capability. So we have the ability for managers in real time to listen and even barge into the call. And we have the ability to notify them based on what's happening in the conversation. So same is true with AI agents. So if a human agent wants to have notifications and then listen or even barge into the call, that exists. And separately, even in cases where that doesn't happen, part of the programming in the AI agents is deciding when you need to transfer to human agent. So if there are certain sentiment that gets breached, so if the customer is angry enough, or they ask for certain things, it automatically can transfer into a human. So part of the trouble actually with there is not the technology on the AI side. That's relatively easy. It's, are humans available?
The scheduling, yeah.
You can staff AI agents to a point whenever you want. They're always available. But now you have a situation where the AI agent knows it can't do the thing. It wants to transfer a human, and there is no human there. So what do? The options basically are like to pre-schedule a call, or to say, hey, without pre-scheduling it, is there something that I can do in the meantime? That is not yet very well worked out, to be honest, because it has to do with staffing levels. It has to do with sort of how do you explain to the customer what the AI can do and can't do. That's a bit fuzzy still, but it has less to do with technology and more to do with, to your point on liberal arts, just thinking through what is the experience that you want to create and what is the best possible outcome. So it's more a liberal arts question and less the technology question.
I think your website states that you don't disclose that there's an AI agent. I won't say bot, Alex. And that makes sense. But I think broadly speaking, maybe in the long term, it really doesn't matter. But it may be in the short term, right? Like, is it important for the end user to know that they're talking to a human versus an AI agent? And how does that transition over time?
So legally today, you don't need to disclose. About half of our customers do, half don't. I'd say in the next couple of years, it's very likely most states require disclosure. In the same way you say this is a reported line, they will require disclosure. So look, in the short term, yes, there's a lot we've learned in how you position it that helps make sure that the customer feels comfortable with it. yes. But like I say, soon enough, you'll have to disclose it. That'll be the only way.
Yeah, makes sense. Look, this has been fantastic. I'm going to broaden it out a little bit. Any other learnings as your team has incorporated generative AI agents into your product and gone from deterministic to, let's say, call it probabilistic outcomes in your product? Any other learnings that you can share with our audience?
Yeah, a couple things. So one is we just actually published a little bit, I think, a podcast about this. Like, I would have built the company completely differently had starting 4 years ago all these capabilities existed, right? Could marketing have been more efficient? Could our engineering team have been more efficient? Could I have done more without hiring a sales team? So, just in the operations of our company, could I have done things a little differently? Or, probably yes. And I think startups should think about that. If you're raising the traditional $3 million seed round that raised, for 18 months, you should be thinking about that 3 million now being for 4 or 5 years, because you can be more efficient with all the AI tools that exist. So, or in 18 months, you need to achieve much more. Like, we shouldn't have the same benchmark for especially early stage companies. In middle stage, it's a bit messier as people are scaling and not everything's working. It's harder to put in great AI for different processes. But same is true at late stage companies. You're seeing again where companies are making AI changes that are massively changing the capabilities of their engineering teams or whatever. So operations is one piece. I'd say the other piece that we've learned a lot of is, there's nuance to this prompt engineering role. And I keep using that word. I truly think this is one of the new roles that will be created. So in the same way, a lot of people are coming out of school saying, I'm going to be an engineer. Now, like, I think you should be thinking about coming out of school being a prompt engineer. And what's the best way to do that? Well, go mess around with ChatGPT, learn how to control ChatGPT. Even as a starting point is pretty good. In the same way, like, people learned how to use like Google search, and maybe my parents' generation didn't know how to use all the features of Google search. This new generation will be more native in that product. And then there will be people that take it to like really the nth degree and can do all kinds of incredible things. And the new products that are built for that role, for prompt engineers, they will have a new product, right? So I think we're sort of in the midst of training more and more of our team to effectively be prompt engineers, which is sort of a fun new thing. Some of them are from CS backgrounds, some are from product backgrounds. Not really any of the engineers yet have stood up and said, I want to do this, but some are from support backgrounds. And so it's interesting to see like who will be successful in this new kind of half technical, half art kind of role. So that's a whole fascinating new area. And then I'd say the last one is just the divergent reactions by customer type. So I made this sort of point a little bit before. In mid-market, we show them the AI agent and they go, "You like, okay, great. Like, it's good enough finally. Like, just put it in production and we'll go." In enterprise, we show them and they go, "Great, it's good enough. Now it's going to be 2 years before we can do this." Guys, I just had a conversation yesterday and like they're just going. And it's not that there aren't enterprises that are more forward thinking. It's just that I think they're putting up too many blockers for themselves. Like, they're going, what are the TCPA rules? Well, actually, they're really clear. It's not complicated. Or they go, what are the ethical, consider it? Well, actually, it's really clear. It's not complicated. So I'm not saying that there won't be complicated problems that come out of it, but right now it's not that complicated in the contact center environment to start shifting some, interactions to AI. And I think the enterprises that are not jumping on it quickly are really going to be in bad shape in a year or two. So I haven't figured out yet, what exactly needs to happen there. But I do think, like, if I were an enterprise CEO, Fortune 500 company that had a contact center, I'd be pushing them really hard to start moving 10 or 20% of their volume into AI agents and giving me great reporting of the impact. What does it do on CSAT? What does it do on average handle time? What does it do on all these other metrics so that I understand it? But I would be pushing quite hard on that.
Yeah, that's some great advice, both on company building, but also on your market, right? And the difference between, there's the adage of AI won't replace your job. Someone using AI will replace your job. And you've kind of put that on the enterprise context as well in terms of being out-competed.
Yeah, I don't know. We've seen funny side effects. So like, first thing that's amusing is you go talk to the contact centers and they go, "Oh, Chloe's doing great." And you go, "Who's Chloe?" They go, "Oh, our AI agent." So all of them, they have names, right? So, because they have to introduce themselves to customers, and the team start thinking of them as another person because they're often interacting with them. They're either transferring calls to them or getting calls from them. they're seeing them on the leaderboards, right? So when we do this, all the data shows both humans and AI agents, and they see how did they do on every kind of interaction. So it actually has created a different kind of competition. I think, also these AI agents just create different. I talked about it a bit before, of different operational needs. So you don't have that many people in a contact center that are there doing coaching and training. All of a sudden, you need two or three more people that are focused on one agent, the AI agent. So you might have one agent for 100, one sort of trainer for 100 agents, and then three for one AI agent. That's like a big mental shift, I think, that needs to happen. So I do think like people are getting used to it, but they're having to shift a bit how they operate.
Yeah, those are great points. Now, we talked a little bit about your investing. Maybe you can talk a little bit about Blue Tail Partners, what your focus is, and then second part to that question is, what opportunities in AI, generative AI, are you most excited about outside of anything Regal does or customer care and support?
Yeah. So when we were at the last company, we're very lucky to see it go from 1 million in revenue to 1.5 billion in revenue. And so Rebecca and I, my co-founder, took our own money, put it into a fund, and decided to invest very early stages where we thought we could have a little bit more impact. And we try to stick to our knitting and mostly stick to areas that we've seen kind of firsthand and know a little bit about. So for instance, like we stay away from, there was a great startup I saw, maybe a year or two ago building an electric boat. Well, I know nothing about that. So like we stay away from those topics. We stick to, data and AI is big for us. Certain industries like healthcare, local services, we know quite well. So there's certain places that we play in. And in those, we're looking for the normal things. I won't say anything drastically different than what other investors will say in terms of early stage. Like we're looking for teams that we think are building something that we kind of already see where it's going, and we want to bet on this team being successful in that area. The only thing we do materially different is we're very clear that we don't follow on. I don't like the interests being misaligned between investors and founders, and this is not meant to be a dig at sort of the multi-stage investment model, but it's not what we want, right? We want to invest at the same place in the cap table as the founders, and for the founders to know that our interests are aligned with theirs and nobody else's. If you are following on as an early stage investor, your interests are different. Like there's different things you're looking for. And so that's the commitment we make, is that we will never follow on. And then, we'll be there. I would do a little more go-to-market advice, and my co-founder really is more the product and engineering advisor. And so, like I say, if once a year we can be materially helpful, we've done our job. Like, that's kind of the level of engagement we have. And all success, right, is on them. But we're not the ones going day to day doing anything. And we get a lot out of it, both emotionally and in terms of learnings around those things. To your question on where we invest in AI, to the point I made, that sort of how do you do QA and what does that look like? Like we've invested in a couple companies in that space, including one that's relatively well known called Distributional. In terms of prompt engineering, we've invested in some. I don't even know if they're launched publicly yet, so I don't know if I can name them. Around prompt engineering, we think like those are areas that are going to become very interesting. And then we've invested in some very industry specific solutions. So an example might be Slang, which is in the restaurant space. So they're taking everything that we just talked about today, very similar concepts, but applying it to very small sort of SMBs in restaurants. So as a restaurant, it's really important what happens when somebody calls, right? Often, most restaurants, that goes unanswered, which is like a ridiculous lost opportunity. And it's like famous that restaurants are terrible at answering the phone. Now with Slang, they can always answer the phone. They can take a booking. They can give them some information. They can do a few other things. And restaurants have seen massive benefit from that. So, we, on a very industry specific level, we do like that sort of AI play. The thing we've been looking for that we haven't particularly found that, again, other people are talking about is instead of bringing, a horizontal AI play into an industry, we'd like to see people rebuild businesses from scratch using AI. So let's say somebody came to us with a new restaurant idea that was AI native, so to speak.
Yeah.
A full stack, a company. We've looked at a bunch, haven't really seen any that like we've moved on. But those are kind of the areas where we stay away from is the 500 startups that I and every investor have seen that are just building like another little AI feature. And
Yeah.
they may be fantastic. I truly think they may be fantastic, but I have no ability as a part-time investor to identify which ones are going to be successful at that early stage. I just can't do it. So I stay where we stay away from that mass of sort of AI features that are coming out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even as a full-time investor, that's quite hard to sometimes pick in some of these areas. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you for all your insights, and you're clearly very passionate and knowledgeable about this space. To close out, where can our listeners learn more about Regal and stay updated with your latest developments and thoughts?
Sure. You can always go online at regal.ai or email me at hello@regal.ai.
Okay. Well, this has been fantastic. Alex, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.